Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Joshua Maddux with us. He's CEO at 95Visual in the greater LA area. He's a podcast host. He helps business owners 3x their customers' interactions online through lead gen mostly. This pod is brought to you by podper.com. If you want to start your own podcast, I can help you do that and generate a bunch of leads, connections, insights, and fun. You can go to podper.com. We have a free ebook and a masterclass for you there. Josh, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, glad to be on, glad to connect. Like you said, I run 95Visual. We're a website digital marketing agency. Been in business coming up on 18 years now, which is crazy in the digital space. Feels like a lifetime. But of recent, really getting into a lot of just AI and how that sort of affects marketing, both on the negative side and the positive side, and how so many business owners seem to love hopping into ChatGPT and having it write the most generalized blog post for them.
95Visual, 18 years, that's a lot of time. Like, why no exit, and how come you're still alive?
Yeah. No, honestly, love doing what we do. We have a lot of clients that we've worked with for years and, continue to offer services to those clients and continue to grow the business. So, I've over the past few years started and some other businesses as well. Some of those have done something. Some of them have, been a fun side project for a year or so and then fizzled out. And so, I think it's the stability there a little bit, but then also, being able to do some side projects. And every time it feels like every time we come up with something, we're like, oh, this one thing would be super cool to like build as a business. And we're like, but it ties into 5 other things we're doing over here with some other client. Like, okay, that's not a business. We'll build it as a product of the business type situation. So we've got a handful of different systems like that now as well.
Right. And launching a successful business, there's like 567 steps to do that. And even if you get the green check marks at first, you launch, you have leads, you have potential buyers. I mean, even if you pass through all these doors, it's not assured that you'll make it because it's a moving target, right? And it also takes a lot of time and energy. So what have been some of your most successful experiments over the years?
Yeah, we've done, it's everything from, we had a client pre-COVID, like, 2019, 2020-ish, that came on board with us. They actually came to us because their Google reviews were absolutely atrocious. And we realized that their Google reviews weren't, the negative reviews weren't the problem. They were selling a product before people fully understood what they were buying. And so there was a sales life cycle issue there. And so, okay, how do we properly inform people? And at the time, their CRM system was a Google spreadsheet, which, hey, the data is in one place. Like, props to them for that. But they've scaled that business up. They've got a handful of full-time salespeople now. We're doing anywhere from about 800 to about 1,200 leads in a given month for them. And so they're just continuing to grow that, continuing to build on that, which is cool. And then alongside of that, we can come in and help. We helped automate one piece of the business. Cool. How do we do that for 3, 4, or 5 other areas where still being able to have the same customer service and all of that type of stuff? So,
would you qualify your podcast experiment as successful? What was the thesis behind that one?
The podcast itself?
Yeah.
So I launched That was during the whole no one going anywhere COVID insanity. And yeah, launched it because my 2020 like goal was like go to more networking events. And we know how that went. And so I was like, well, how do I network with more people and not just be like, you know, cold call you on the phone and be like, hi, I want to get to know your business. Be like, you know, you just hang up on me. And so I was like, well, I can launch podcasts and have conversations. And so it was a really good opportunity for me to sort of have those conversations. I guested on a bunch of podcasts before I launched my own. So that way I was like, there were some podcasts I hopped onto and I was like, that was absolutely painful to be a guest on that show. And so had some very interesting experiences, had some great experiences. But yeah, launched that. And it was definitely an experience. I ended up just life got in the way a little bit, and so ended up hitting the pause button on it. The other thing is I moved offices. I was literally in like a little tiny like bunker office, partly the name. And so I'm actually in the process of relaunching something a little later this year. And then I co-host a podcast locally for a chamber. And so yeah, podcast experience for me has been it's awesome. Honestly, it's one of those ways where I feel like it is the professional, like more networking, like these types of conversations. Then you know, sometimes you go to a networking event and they're amazing and you get to connect with a bunch of people. And then other times you show up and you go home and you're like, I wasted 2 hours and now I have to unsubscribe from 85 different people's email lists for the next week and a half because that's all people wanted was my business card. Um, and so I feel like podcasting, you know, allows you to have a better conversation and, you know, just a little bit more of a pointed element. And then, you know, go from there.
What were your pains? You described these painful experiences on podcasts. What made these experiences painful? I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh, on the in the bunker. Yeah. So
Well, both sides, right? Like when you interview a guest, but I think you mentioned when you were interviewed was sometimes it was quite painful.
oh yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I was a guest on an episode. The podcast aired and then there was like 3 more episodes after me and then they ended the podcast and it now does not exist online anymore. I can't find it. But it was like got on the call and the person had no direction for the podcast. They were like 50 or 60 episodes in. I, as a guest, should have listened to 1 or 2 episodes and seen the train wreck it was. And any element that we'd start talking about, they would just make a left turn randomly during the conversation. And there was no flow. And it was hard as a guest to just sit there and have a conversation. And then after the fact, like I watched it, they chopped it up really poorly as well. Like the editing was terrible. And overall it was bad. It was bad.
And then on the guest side, you interviewing guests, how should guests prepare to actually perform on the podcast?
Oh man, I think the absolute worst guest that the episode never went live. And if they see this, don't do this again. I at the
Let
time
me
was doing
guess, it
all
was a
my
pitch.
what?
It was a pitch. Let me
Yeah.
guess.
No, it was not actually. I did have a pitch that I then abruptly stopped the person and said, that's not what we're doing here. We can continue the conversation or we can end it here. And the guy was like, okay, sorry. And like, cut that clip. No, the worst interview I had, there was a guy who hopped on the Zoom call and he had his phone in his cup holder in his car, and he's just cruising down the freeway. And I was like, yeah, I'm not comfortable doing this. And I was just like, we can reschedule. And he's like, no, I'm good. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to be the one responsible for you getting in a, collision on the freeway. And I was like, nope.
I thought you were gonna say like all the disruptions from the notifications on the phone. I had some of that, like someone's
I've
phone
had
that
those too.
rings every minute. But she was actually great in the end. Just that I don't like do post pods edit, so that was live. Although I do cut these into shorts.
I had a guest like that at the beginning. I started out the intro and I got 2 minutes in, and 2 minutes in, the guy had like 3 phone calls in the first 2 minutes, and I was like, hey, okay, I'm gonna can we disable notifications, because this is getting like one of the first things. I have a Google Home that sits on my desk. One of the first things I do when I hop on a call like this is I unplug it. I don't mute it. I physically unplug it, because I know inevitably it's gonna go off right during the middle of something, and or I'll be talking about, yeah, we do this or we do such and such, and I will say a word that triggers that device, and then I'll say something, and then it's going to start reading the Wikipedia article of how to make a hamburger or something.
That's pretty fun. Talking about AI, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you're geeking out a lot on ChatGPT. What are the use cases for precisely what you do, write websites and optimization and so forth, and for your clients?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I want to talk about is a great not use case. I see this all the time where a business owner will literally be like, I'm a plumber, and they'll go to ChatGPT and they'll be like, write me a blog post about plumbing. That is going to be the most generalized content known to man. Like, it's terrible. So how do we fix that? How do we correct that? How do we make that content better? So internally for my business, I guest podcast. I am on interviews like this. I host shows. I take all that transcripted content of me talking, and I have like 30 hours of that. We have a custom trained GPT that has all of that 30 hours of my conversations and how I talk and all of that. Our marketing director can actually pass a newsletter idea or something through that, and it will rewrite it as if I wrote it. Oftentimes rather undetectable to anyone else on our team, knowing whether or not I wrote the content, which is really good. And so I think that's some of the type of stuff that people need to think about, is how do we make sure that this has the voice and the tone of the business, and not just let's just barf out hundreds of pages of blog posts, because in reality, we go back to the element of quality over quantity, and it can help produce that quality content if it's trained. It's the same element of if you hire an employee and you don't give them any training and tell them to start making phone calls, out to a list of people, sales calls, and you don't train them on your products or services, they're going to be pretty terrible sales calls. If you train them on the products and services, they're going to be so much better. And so we do this on every other facet of the business, but then we look at AI and we tell it to write a generalized blog post, and then we're frustrated why it's not personalized and exactly the content we need.
Yeah, prompting is everything.
Yeah.
Are you still bullish on humans and employees vs AI agents nowadays that you can program to run tasks for you?
It depends on what it is. We draft a lot of stuff. We'll do we have like different processes internally that we pull data sets, we draft reports, we draft a lot of stuff with it. We still have a human sort of double check and review. and we do, a lot of stuff that way. We, use a lot of that heavily. We're in the process right now of actually developing a product sort of around this product service from a content creation perspective, which is gonna be cool. Can't go into a ton of that because we're mid
Well, now it's too late. You
Yeah,
can't turn back. Tell
Yeah.
us more about that. That's
Well,
interesting
so
to me. I have a client that is also on that path.
Yeah. So one of the things I'll say is like so much of content strategy, and this is something that we've seen just time and time again, is so much of content strategy is like, oh, we need to write a blog post for Friday's email. Like, I don't know, like we're a marketing company, like top 5 marketing trends for March. Sure, sounds great. Let's do that. I don't know, what are trends? Well, Easter's coming. What can we do for Easter? Like, that's the direction that so many businesses go for writing a blog post, where they're not tying it back to like, what's this year's business goal? Like, we didn't really
Or what's on my mind? What is powerful to me and my customers, right? Like the Venn diagram between both.
100%. Well, and it's who's the ideal client? What's the business goals this year? How does that content support that? And if we're just writing content just to write content because we need to fulfill a quota type situation, like that's not really going to help the marketing efforts. But if the business goal is to enter into a new vertical, to, see and have a new niche, see the business more, or enter a new geographic location, like if those are some of the business goals, then great. We need to write content around those, not just write stuff that's generalized and not going to necessarily support that long-term vision, because we're going to hit December and we're going to go, well, didn't really hit the marketing goals for this year. Try again next year. And so we're looking at it from a strategic planning perspective, really. There's a lot of there's a WordPress plugin called like Autoblogger that just spits out blog posts every day, time and time again. Those are great at just mass production of content, but they're not focused in what they're doing. And so how do we properly focus content strategy, and go from there?
Because back then that was better than not having anything, and maybe Google would pick up on that if you're lucky. But nowadays it's pretty obvious that a bot build those. Your tool, is it fill in the blank, like what your company does, pain points that you address, your ICP, and so forth. And once you have that, then the GPT itself can produce stuff. And what would be the difference between your tool and me dropping my content GPT, which I already did for my clients? It's literally a GPT on ChatGPT on the store. And they can just open the chat and put in their business info, and then it will start creating posts for them.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is a long-term strategy element. So this would be something that on a monthly basis, it's going to spit out blog post, newsletter, what are social media posts, content, and then basically taking what's the annual marketing goals, breaking those down into quarters. What is the quarterly goal? Then taking the quarterly goals, breaking those down into monthly content, and then going through the whole process. It's the same concept that a marketing strategist and a content strategist is going to do manually. We're just looking at it from a perspective of how do we streamline that? How do we automate some of that? And then on the back end, we have sort of 2 different service offerings that we're working on. One is like automated and then you review, or automated and we basically go through a final content refresh and audit and all that.
So, and a website agency like yours, how do you distinguish yourself nowadays? And what's new in the website world? Because anytime I think of website, is like boring stuff that I don't know was trendy 10 years ago. What's new in the website world? What's hot?
Yeah, so it's weird. The website space for us has really shifted a lot over the past 4 or 5 years, especially since a lot of the Google algorithm changes. It used to be businesses would, spend a substantial amount of money on a website, and that was where you spent a decent chunk of money on that. You did some really good content, did some really good SEO, and for the next 3-4 years, you would have a good steady inflow of leads. With between Google algorithm changes, content production with something like AI being very different now, we're seeing what sort of needed there on the website change fairly dramatically. And in reality, like, some businesses are just so busy they can't, it's like, we need before and after photos of that remodel that you guys did. They just don't have the content. And so we're seeing a lot more stuff in the sense of like AI agents from a web perspective. We've got clients that have like AI chatbot type stuff that can gather content, do some of the initial lead qualification, and then look at setting up, a discovery call or something there. And so really, how do we take that person who's sitting on the website, if we're getting less traffic today than we were, 4 or 5 years ago, how do we convert and close, or get more people to a discovery call? What type of stuff can we do with something like an AI chatbot or something?
Right. And we hear a lot. Well, back then was search engine optimization. Nowadays could be LLM search optimization, right? Popping on ChatGPT, popping on Claude. Is it the same principles as back then? Optimizing a website, creating great content, and being featured there. What has changed in that new LLM optimization game?
So the LLM optimization, I want to be cautious on how I say this because I'm going to get hate on that. I think some of it's a load of BS, because in reality, what ChatGPT or Claude or any of these know about a business, they probably know what your company is. And you can have 50 people say, what's the best taco shop in Los Angeles? And you're going to get varying results just from the same AI across 30, 40, 50 tries, specifically because it's analyzing the data in different ways. The first it does it purely off Yelp results, and the next time it does it off Google reviews, and the next time it does it off of price comparison, and so one of the things, like, obviously, to show up in that potential data set, we still want to have a well-optimized website. We still want to have, directory listings, whether that's Google, Yelp, any of those other ones. Like, we still want to have all of that. That is going to, massively increase the ability for you to show up there. But at the same point, like, I, for my own business, like, if you Google search 95Visual, you'll see pretty quickly, like, we're a marketing agency, website design. But if you go over and ask Gemini what 95Visual does, and then ask it the same question again, we've seen it say everything from that we're a 3D geospatial rendering company, to we are in the film production industry. We are in, like, it's all over the place. And the funniest part is, like, Gemini, like, will give you, a lot of these will give you source documentation of where they're finding this, and you click on the link and you're like, this page has nothing to do with the hypothetical summary that you provided. It's, some of it is helpful and some of it's not. And that's where it goes back to the whole piece of, don't use it with blinders on. Like, you need to make sure that we're still verifying it, we're still fact checking, and making sure the content that's produced is still good.
Right. So ultimately, you can't really optimize for that.
You can to a point. Like, there are things you can do on the flip side. Like, you can literally put a robots.txt file saying, OpenAI, like, don't look at my website. And so you can do, the other way around. And so, I think as long as, most of the optimization stuff is basically similar to, what you would do for Google and SEO.
Right. Where can people find out more about you, Josh?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, obviously, Joshua Maddux, or 95visual.com.
It was Josh Maddux and Charles Cormier for